Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Franchising Matters video series brought to you by Reshift Media. My name's Steve Bjors, and I'll be your host. I'm joined today by Jason Gehrke, who's the director of the Franchise Advisory Center. Jason has a passion for franchising and has been involved in the sector for more than 30 years. He has worked at the franchisee level, launched a franchise system, provided advisory service to many leading Australian franchise systems, and advised many hundreds of potential franchisees and potential franchisors over the years. He's the founder of the Franchise Advisory Center, an education and advisory service that assists franchisors and franchisees to work more effectively together. More than half of the franchise brands in Australia and New Zealand have attended a professional development event presented by Jason. Couldn't be more happy to have you here today. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks, Steve. G'day, nice to be here.
So why don't we start by learning a little bit about the Franchise Advisory Center, pardon me. Why don't you share a little detail about the organization?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. Franchise Advisory Center was set up to fill in information gaps for franchisors. The thing is, when businesses start franchising, they don't know what they don't know. They're great at making burgers. They're great at, washing dogs or cleaning cars or doing whatever it is that their business does. But the business model of franchising is something that's new and exciting for them to help them grow, but is full of a lot of pitfalls along the way if they don't know what they're doing. And so having, an extensive experience in franchising before I started this, I decided that it was important that franchisors have access to meaningful education about best practices in franchising so that they could avoid mistakes which hurt and impact their businesses, but also hurt and impact their franchisees' businesses. So for the last 20 years, I've been running franchise education for franchisors. And then for those who are interested, then there's some supplementary advisory services as well. But primarily, we're an education business for franchisors, and today deliver education under the auspices of the Certified Franchise Executive Program, the CFE program, throughout Australia and New Zealand, and have done so through North America and the Philippines and other countries as well.
Oh, very interesting. Well, and I liked what you had about the organization here that I just said a minute ago about the fact that it's about helping franchisees and franchisors work more effectively together.
Yeah.
Franchising is a fascinating business model, and you just said it well, fraught with pitfalls. Love that one of the things you're doing is helping franchisors and franchisees collaborate, because I think that's really the magic of franchising is when that can happen, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned the fact that you've been at this more than 20 years, very impressive. So as someone who speaks at conferences around the world, works with so many different types of franchise systems, what are you seeing that in terms of trends or in terms of things to watch for that franchise systems should be looking out for?
Uh, Increasingly, franchisors have come to the realization, and it sounds like a statement of the bleeding obvious, but they are increasingly coming to the realization that their franchisees need to be profitable. And
Lo and behold, right?
yeah, that's right. Who knew? That franchisees need to be profitable, and that franchisors need to have a greater interest in helping franchisees achieve and sustain meaningful levels of profitability. Historically, franchising has been focused on exponential growth for the franchisor without considering the need for growth for the franchisee. And that's not just growth for the franchisee at a unit level. So, that franchisee needs to grow. Let's give them a second, third, fourth, fifth, 20th, 50th, 100th outlet. But each outlet individually has to perform as well. And so there is a greater interest, and some parts of the world are more focused on this than others, but there is a growing and greater interest in individual franchisee profitability, and therefore the support systems and the reporting systems that need to fall in behind that as well. I have recently retired from the boards of a couple of franchise brands here in Australia, and one of which was, over 130 outlets. In that particular brand, we as the franchisor had true visibility over individual franchisee profitability. And rather than relying on the standard clause in the franchise agreement, which says you must provide us with a P&L once every, month, quarter, half year, or year, and rely on information provided by the franchisee, we actually had such a dynamic reporting system and IT platform that we as the franchisor would generate those monthly P&Ls for the franchisee and report to them, flipping that dynamic on its head, but adding massive value to the franchise relationship at the same time.
Oh, really interesting. And what kind of trends are you seeing in terms of helping drive that profitability? I've heard lots of talk about shrinking some footprints and operational efficiencies. Anything in particular that franchise systems you think are digging into to help with that profitability at the ground level?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've touched on one of the first ones, which is shrinking footprints,
Yeah.
because that has a capital impact on the initial investment cost, and money's not easy to get. And if it is easy to get, there's usually strings attached. Uh, or people over leverage themselves. And then if there's an interest rate shift, then suddenly they're all squealing.
Yeah.
So making sure that the capital outlay is not more than it needs to be is important, because that also has ongoing, costs in relation to funding issues, occupancy costs, etc. Then operational efficiencies are important too, but operational efficiencies can be a whole bunch of different things. How long it takes to serve a customer will impact the labour cost across, an entire performance period. But franchisors often reward themselves with royalty models based on the franchisee's top line sales performance.
Right.
And so that's often all they measure. Whereas looking at the franchisee's cost base is equally important in the costs plus revenue together determine the profitability of the franchisee's business. So franchisors who have a greater interest in helping franchisees manage, contain, and control costs are greatly contributing towards profit improvement for those franchisees. And those cost controls can be from better buying, more efficient logistics. They can be through the kinds of operational efficiencies that that you would generally consider anyway. But sometimes it can even be things like just the benchmarking that franchisors do across the network can identify when a franchisee's cost base in some particular element is 1 or 2% out of skew. And then it might be because of something that's really left of center that the franchisee isn't even aware of themselves. And that might be a staff member's been stealing from them. And the franchisor, by virtue of the group knowledge that it has across the entire network, can identify, okay, your cost of goods is higher than everyone else. And why is that? You're rotating stock, you're buying at the right levels, but there's a higher wastage factor. And it only happens when this shift occurs and the people who are rostered on this shift consistently are this person. So let's look closer at that.
Interesting.
And when franchisors have that level of visibility over franchisees' businesses and can provide those insights into business and profit performance, it adds terrific value to the relationship. And that's a growing trend internationally.
I love that because, that's one of the big things about franchising is you join a franchise for that level of expertise where you might not know all the ins and outs, and if the franchisor is able to help in that regard, help you actually manage your business, actually find efficiencies. I love that. That makes total sense.
Yeah. And franchisees don't know what they don't know. And they look to the franchisor for advice and guidance throughout the franchise relationship. And, as the relationship progresses, sometimes franchisees begin to think, I'm doing okay now. I kind of have this thing mastered, tick, but there's always going to be something to come around the corner which will surprise and challenge them. And so there is still enduring value in the franchise relationship as a result.
I love that. Well, so let me ask you on the topic of operational efficiency and just general pace of change in the industry. So everyone's talking about technology and the pace of technology change. Everyone's talking about AI. Yeah, you can't go anywhere without saying the word AI these days. What do you see out there, Jason? Is it really something franchisors should be worried about right now? Is it more that they should be worried about, the fundamentals of their business? And I know every business is different, so I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush. But as someone who talks to a lot of franchise systems and, obviously speaks at these conferences, what are you seeing, and what do you think of the whole pace of technology, AI sort of sphere?
The pace of technology doesn't slow down. It and so one of the things that we need to understand about the franchise relationship is that it is a mutual outsourcing of functions. So in a franchise relationship, franchisors outsource front of house activities to franchisees. So the franchisees are dealing with customers, making the products and services available in a meaningful and efficient manner in localized markets. In return, franchisees outsource back of house functions to the franchisor, and that includes IT, marketing, logistical support, operations efficiencies, a whole bunch of other things. So franchisees naturally expect that when there's something new happening in the world of IT, that their franchisor will already be across it. Now, if the franchisor isn't across it, they risk being dragged kicking and screaming into it by the franchisees who are all keen and eager to know, hey, what's this AI stuff? What does this mean for me? How can this help improve my business? But the implementation of any new technology has very profound change management impacts across an organization. And I'm sure there's no shortage of franchisors who can talk about the time that they rolled out a new IT thing and, it didn't go quite as expected and it cost more and it took longer. And,
Oh, yeah, I'm
and
sure.
there were all these other things that came along as well. And in regards to that, AI is probably no different. All right, so from a franchisee customer-facing point of view, there would be an expectation among franchisees that AI can help improve some labor efficiencies somewhere along the line, right? Because if you can have a machine thinking to do something that a worker could do, hey, good, that's going to save us some money. But let's make sure that the AI is performing to equal to or greater than the standard than what the human would achieve at a best practice level in the
Yeah.
first instance. And sometimes people may be tempted to roll out some AI initiatives before that best practice level has been truly established. So, you'll have strange things happening. Equally, on the franchisor side of the equation, AI could be conceivably used in franchise in the early stages of franchise recruitment to manage inquiries back and forth from potential franchisees. And I would caution franchisors to jump in too deeply too soon in doing that, because the nature of franchise recruitment, particularly from the franchisee or the potential franchisee's perspective, is that they want to know that they're dealing with people, and they want to know that they're dealing with people that they can trust.
Right.
And, we might love Siri, but, sometimes Siri will still lead us up the garden path. So we've got to be careful about embracing something to an extent that might actually have a negative impact in the in the franchise candidate's journey to coming on board with us. There are other things that AI can do for us at a franchise or head office level, however, which I think can add real value to the franchise relationship, and which I'd actually prioritize above using AI in recruitment. And that is data analytics,
Right.
looking at the performance metrics of franchisees and being able to do some very, very powerful analysis to identify anomalies and outliers that might be indicators of franchisees performing above best practice. And hey, let's look at that to see how we can adopt that across the rest of the network. Or franchisees performing below levels of best practice, where we can manage by exception and then look to coach those franchisees back up to levels of best practice and beyond. So I guess the long and short of it, Steve, is that as with anything new, explore it, understand it, experiment with it, but make sure you've tested it to the nth degree before you start rolling it out. And if you don't do it as a franchisor, your franchisees will naturally expect you to do it. And if you haven't done it yet, they will start experimenting themselves. And you've got 200 different franchisees who might be, half of which might be beginning to do some experiments in the AI space. And, then you as the franchisor will have some inconsistency issues across your network.
Yeah, absolutely. I liked how you tied that though to your first point, right? So, big trend is that franchise systems are helping their franchisees with profitability, identifying anomalies, and you're absolutely right. AI is a great opportunity to catapult that to the next level. So, that's really really interesting, and I'm sure valuable for any franchisors that are watching this as a potential opportunity for them.
That's right. And it's still got to be done with the appropriate stages and levels of human intervention, such that, you're not going to have AI doing an assessment of franchisee performance criteria and then automatically generating breach notices if the performance criteria doesn't meet the required standard. I think you need to have a stage of human intervention there to say, hang on, let's have a closer look at this to see what we do with this information. Before we go to the next level of activity, whether that's a breach notice or some other intervention that we apply.
Yeah, it makes good sense. Well, and so let me ask you then, Jason. So, as someone who, again, is talking with so many franchise systems, and the nice thing is that you're helping these franchise systems kind of understand how to operate better. Is there something out there that you don't think people are talking about enough in the franchising sphere? Is there some topic that you think is really important that not necessarily is seeing the light of day that you think it should?
Oh wow, we're going to get into trouble here now, Steve.
That's what I'm here for.
Profitability is one,
Yeah.
right? If I come to you as a potential franchise candidate and you're a franchisor, and I ask you how much money will I make, your response will be a whole bunch of words that will exclude any mention of a number.
I like that. I like that.
And look, that's what we've been coached to do in franchise recruitment, because of course we don't want to get sued for making a false and misleading representation. But if you look at different investment categories, if you go and put your money in a bank's going to tell you how much the interest rate will be right up front. So you'll know, okay, well, if I put $100,000 into this bank or savings bond or what have you, then this is the return that I can reasonably expect. And other forms of investments are like that. We don't do that in franchising, and we don't do that because we don't want to get sued. But you won't get sued for making a misrepresentation if the representation that you have made is actually accurate or is factual and data based. And I think we are so conservative in our approach to recruitment and in our approach to talking about return on investment for franchise assets that we lead the franchisees, or we let the franchisees to come to their own conclusions, and those conclusions might be wildly misinformed, and the franchisee then doesn't, then the franchisee doesn't meet our expectations in their performance, or the franchisee doesn't meet their own expectations in performance, and we inevitably run into conflict in the franchise relationship anyway.
Interesting.
Another thing that is perhaps a very, very difficult topic to discuss, especially in North America at the moment, is labor.
Oh yeah.
Right. With real concerns around what joint employer liability might look like, particularly in the USA, but in Canada, there's concerns around that as well.
Yep.
And I can share with you, Steve, that Australia is the most highly regulated franchise nation on the planet.
Really interesting.
Absolutely. And as a consequence, I say that Australia is the New York of franchising. So if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. So we've got a national franchising code of conduct. We've got other laws that impact franchising, such as unfair contract laws. So if you have an unfair term in your franchise agreement, it can be voided. And in fact, not only can it be voided, but you can be fined for having an unfair contract term. So you've got to be careful about what you put in your agreement, your operations manual. But we also have joint employer liability as well. And that joint employer liability for those two brands on which I was on the board, would come back to me personally if we had a franchisee in our network underpaying or incorrectly paying their workers. We as the franchisor would have to make good, and if the franchisor couldn't make good, then the directors would be individually liable.
Wow.
Now, that had existed for 5 years prior to my term on those boards ending. So for 5 years, I carried that risk and responsibility, but I knew that our businesses were very capable in managing that risk through appropriate systems, training of our head office staff, but also our franchisees. And we had really good processes to manage that risk so that it actually was never an issue across the 180, 190 collective outlets of those two brands for the time that I was on those boards. Now, I know that the joint employer argument in North America is slightly different in what's being proposed. It's more about the perspective that a franchisee might be viewed as an employee of the franchisor. And I know that there's a lot of lobbying going on around that. But there is already precedent for that in North America. If you look at, I'm pretty sure it was the state of Massachusetts about 10 or 15 years ago, there was a determination by a court there that the franchisees of a particular brand were effectively the employees of the franchisor because of the financial relationship that existed between them, and particularly given the directionality of payment in that system, where the franchisor actually collected money from the customers and paid that down to the franchisee, less, of course, their royalties. And that there was other things that went behind that as well, which led the court to that particular determination. But there's a joint employer precedent for you long before the current discussion and concern about joint employer erupted in North America.
Well, and it is a hot topic. There's no doubt about it. And beyond that, even just sourcing labor, if you're saying the word labor, just getting enough staff members for your local franchisees to operate and for head offices even to operate. I don't know a single franchise system in North America that I'm talking to that isn't telling me they need more people. So it's a multifaceted problem, absolutely.
It is, and there will be a balancing of that. These things come in cycles. When I look at the environmental factors that impact the health of franchising, one of those environmental factors that I look at is levels of unemployment in an economy. And where you have levels of unemployment at 5% or below, it has a double whammy impact on franchising. Franchisees struggle to get staff, and franchisors struggle to recruit franchisees because the jobs market's so good. Not many of them are leaving a hot jobs market where they can get pay rises and promotions or move from one well-paying job to a better paying job. It's harder to get those people to come out of that market and take on the risk of a franchise. But as the economic cycle changes, as inevitably it does, then unemployment begins to go up. And as unemployment goes up, it increases the labour pool for franchisees, so that's good for them. And it certainly increases the talent pool of franchise candidates for franchisors.
Interesting. Kind of counter-cyclical there. That's interesting.
Yeah, and franchising historically has this beautiful counter-cyclical level of performance because it's not just about the availability of labor as well, but when you think about the discipline of marketing in a franchise network, where franchisees are contributing to advertising funds and where there is typically an obligation for the franchisee to engage in their own local area marketing. When times are good, franchisees kind of take all that stuff for granted. But when times are bad, that tends to create more traction for the franchise brand and the franchise network at the same time as individual small businesses and corporate competitors are cutting marketing budgets to try and preserve profits. So, whilst a negative economic cycle isn't going to be a golden opportunity for everyone in franchising, it generally has a better impact on, or a less negative outcome for franchise networks than a whole bunch of others. For some of those reasons, it's about labor and it's about that sustained marketing activity when everyone else is pulling back. So you're getting market share off independents and off corporate competitors.
A very interesting insight. And it makes sense when you think about it. And it makes sense when you sort of see how so many franchise systems weathered the COVID storm actually quite well and came out stronger. And that makes good sense because they were continuing to invest. Really, really interesting.
And just on COVID, Steve, too, one of the things that we learned from COVID is that franchise networks can adapt and change very quickly when everybody is aligned to the circumstances. And many franchisors will talk about change management and franchising and say, oh my God, it's so difficult to implement change across the network. We found in COVID that because everyone understood the environmental circumstances that were impacting our customers, our businesses, our supply chains, that we were able to respond really, really quickly. Franchise networks have discovered that as a result of that, their change management timeframes post-COVID need not be as long as they were before COVID. But what we have to be mindful of is losing that agility, because if there is a disadvantage to franchising, there's not many, but there's a few. But one of the disadvantages to franchising is that franchise networks may be less agile than their corporate competitors. And in COVID, we became as agile as our corporate competitors. In some cases, we even outstripped the agility of our corporate competitors. But as we move back into a normalized world, we are at risk of losing that agility. And that agility gives us a competitive advantage, or at least the means to compete on an equal footing with corporate competitors.
I totally agree. We saw so many of our franchise clients really rise to the occasion. And it is interesting because everyone has a vested interest in success. Your franchisees aren't just collecting a paycheck. They're there to grow their business as part of the overall franchise system. And so it was amazing to watch so many franchise brands harness the power of the innovation in their company. They know their local markets. They have effectively in-house entrepreneurs or being their franchisees. And when aligned, as you well said, these organizations can do amazing things. And it's well said in that, we've got to be careful that we don't get complacent again going into business as usual sort of mode. That's for sure.
Yeah. If you are thinking that you can expect a future of business as usual, you're probably already kidding yourself.
You're halfway out of business already.
Yeah, that's right. Every day is a challenge in franchising, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But at individual franchisee level as well, every franchisee is only ever one phone call, text message, or email away from chaos and anarchy. When a valued member of staff leaves, when a supplier can't deliver, when a piece of infrastructure changes and dramatically impacts their business. So complacency is is not something that anybody can afford in business. And in franchise networks, we should be particularly aware that being complacent is not a recipe for long-term success and survivability.
Well said. So amazing insights. Last question, an ability for you to impart your wisdom upon people. If you had one piece of advice to give to franchise companies, any franchise organization watching this, is there anything specific you'd share with them?
Find out what you don't know and fill those knowledge gaps. And that might be a bit of a shameless plug for franchise education more broadly, but hubris is the enemy of success. And just because franchisors might think, hey, we're successful, we're doing all right, we've got 100, 200, 300, 400 outlets, whatever it might be, developing those internal capabilities in the business is an ongoing challenge for franchisors, because people come and go, they rotate in and out of franchise networks. And what your people know walks out the door with them. And I don't know any franchise brand that has such intensely successful corporate memory systems that have documented everything and have made the documentation of all those things and the secret sauce to their success so accessible to new staff that new staff have never needed to undertake some kind of franchise professional development and training. And that's not just for franchisors as well, but it applies to franchisees too. And I think generally in franchising, and there's an ongoing process of improvement here, franchisors do a great job teaching franchisees how to make burgers or make coffee or whatever it is that their business requires them to do. But franchisors don't always do such a great job in teaching people the business skills that support those operational requirements as well. So we have challenges in many networks with franchisee financial literacy. They actually don't know how to read a P&L and a balance sheet and understand what that means for them. We don't always train franchisees very well around managing, leading, and incentivizing their own personnel.
Right.
And we hope that that's a natural talent and skill that they will bring, and maybe it is, but that is a skill that can be trainable as well. So I think this constant process of ongoing professional development is just so important on both the franchisor and franchisee sides of the relationship. But of course, if that's not something that's in the DNA of a franchisor, then it's not going to be something that the franchisees will inherit as part of the cultural values of that brand as well.
Well said. So yeah, if you don't know it, go learn it. I love it.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, Jason, this has been amazing. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to share your thoughts with our audience here. Thanks for everyone who listened in. If you haven't already, I encourage you to click the like and subscribe. Stay up to date with all of our episodes. Thanks again, Jason. Have an amazing day.
Thanks, Steve. All the best. Appreciate the time.